Happy Hispanic and Latinx Heritage Month. I'm the son of a Guatemalan refugee, and I love my Latinx heritage. I love being Guatemalan. I belong to a people who create so many beautiful things, who inhabit one of the most beautiful landscapes on the planet, and a people, Guatemalan fan over here, and a people who have been through so much. Like the Palestinian people and many peoples around the planet, my people were subjected to a US-backed genocide that took place during the horrific 36-year war between 1960 and 1996 when I was growing up there. We are a resilient people, a strong people, and our food is really good. Thank God for Latinx people. I'm also, real briefly, the parent of the child who last week on stage, when they responded to Reverend Amanda's question about what they did standing in front of the Heritage Foundation, and my kid responded, "You gave it the middle finger?" That was my kid, so you're welcome. We take justice seriously. I also want to quickly acknowledge that we are living, working, and gathering today on the land that belongs to the Lenape people. I'm grateful that they let us be here, live here, work here, eat here, and I hope that we can continue to steward their land and their resources well. I've only got 15 minutes, so let's dig right in. As we get into this sermon about loving God by loving people, and loving God and loving people, we must recognize that God's love is massive, is wide, and it's the beginning of all things. Could we with ink the oceans fill, and were the skies of parchment made, were every stalk on earth a quill, and every man a scribe by trade, to write the love of God above could drain the oceans dry, and nor could the scroll contain the whole, though stretched from sky to sky. That's the final verse of one of my favorite hymns, The Love of God, and it captures so well the love of God and how big it truly is. And we must recognize, if we're going to talk about how do we love God and people well, we've got to recognize where that love comes from, where it originates. This sermon title comes from the idea that Ram Dass, may he rest in peace, a teacher for many of us maybe in this room, talked about frequently, about how he fell in love with the universe and fell in love with people, and how hard it is to talk about that because there are so many horrific things happening all the time in this place that we live. Today I want to take that idea of how to keep your heart open in hell, the title of the sermon, how to keep your heart open in hell. I want to couple it with this massively important text, and I want to share a few practical ways that we can live lives truly loving God and loving people, because as the text just said, loving God includes loving people. You have to do both. Let's jump right in. The first way that we can keep our hearts open in hell, love God, and love all people is to recognize that we are all connected. It's all connected. It's easy to agree when I say that, and you think about the people maybe in this room, or your partner, or your kids, or your friends, your family. It's easy to hear we're all connected and agree with it. If I ask you to picture the people that are easy for you to love, faces and names came to mind right away, right? But what about when I ask you about the people that are hard to love? Faces and names came right to mind, right? It's very easy for me to love Mike in the back, or Mackie, or John, or many people in this room. These are people that are easy to fall in love with. But, and I don't know about you, maybe you're better people than I am, but it's much more difficult for me to love. I'm going to name a few groups of people. It's difficult for me to love conservative evangelical Christians. It's difficult for me to love Trump supporters. It's difficult for me to love people that love capitalism, that live for capitalism. It's difficult for me to love anti-abortion folks and anti-LGBTQ folks and pro-military industrial complex folks and white supremacists. These are groups that make it much harder to read that passage and agree with it wholeheartedly. This whole thing gets really complex when we start to, again, think of people, and Donald Trump, for example. to think I am Donald Trump and Donald Trump is me. If everything is connected, if it's all connected, I am Bibi Netanyahu and Bibi Netanyahu is me. Let me bring it close to home. I am Eric Adams and Eric Adams is me. Yes, that is a well-deserved groan for the mayor. But we're all connected. We're all connected. Buddhist monk and peace activist Thich Nhat Hanh has this remarkable and profound poem called Call Me by My True Names. I'm not going to read the full thing right now, but here's a few excerpts. I am a frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am also the pirate, incapable of, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. Thich Nhat Hanh says, please call me by my true names, so I can hear all the cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true name so I can wake up and the door of my heart could be left open, the door of compassion. I'm a follower of Jesus. It's easy to be a follower of Jesus when you read about Jesus going after the Pharisees, right? We're rooting for Jesus. Get him. It's also easy to be a follower of Jesus when he's being sassy and sarcastic and a little cryptic with his disciples. It's a lot harder when he looks at us and says, love your enemies. Love your enemies. That is a wild thing. We've heard it since we were young, right? I've heard it since I heard all the words. I've been reading that for decades. That is a wild thing to ask people to do. Let's read a bit quickly of what Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew said, again in the message. You're familiar with the old law, love your friend, and its unwritten companion, hate your enemy. I'm challenging that. I'm telling you to love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with the supple moves of prayer, for then you are working out your true selves, your God-created selves. This is what God does. She gives her best, the sun to warm and the rain to nourish, to everyone regardless, the good and the bad, the nice and the nasty. If all you do is love the lovable, friends, do you expect a bonus? Anybody can do that. If you simply say hello to those who greet you, do you expect a medal? Any run-of-the-mill sinner can do that, Jesus says in the message. In a word, what I'm saying is grow up. Your kingdom subjects. Now live like it. Live out your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously toward others the way God lives toward you. This is the longest point that I'm going to make. The rest will be a lot shorter. It's also the hardest one because I really wish that I didn't have to stand up here and communicate this to you. I'm not worthy. I am terrible at this first point. Every single day I fail miserably at this first point of seeing that we're all connected and then living out that truth. The second way we can keep our hearts open in hell, love God and love people, is to show up as the weak and flawed people that we are. Naturally, I think we think that our strengths alone can help us change the world. That's what we have to bring to the table, our strengths, so that we can change the world. We need to show up in charge, strong, and ready to ruffle feathers. But early Christian philosopher and theologian Origen tells us that our wounds will turn into health-bestowing wounds. That it's our wounds that lead us to wisdom, and our losses that lead us to love, not our strengths. Our wounds become health-bestowing wounds, the source of our strength, the source of our unique perspective that we bring to the table, to this community. Each one of us, all the wounds that you have, they're unique to you, and if you don't show up with those wounds, then we don't get that strength and that wisdom that comes from it. Alongside that, Catholic priest and spiritual parent to me and many others, Richard Rohr. Any Father Richard Rohr fans in the room? Okay, we got a couple. Father Richard Rohr says, you have to suffer the daily humiliations that are being given to you all the time. Don't resist them. Don't fight them. Don't oppose them. Don't disagree with them. Agree with them. Not in a self-defeating way, but just yup, I'm a little shit, and that's okay. I didn't say I'm a little shit. Father Richard Rohr said that, so you can't get mad at me for saying that behind the pulpit. He says, and that's okay. When you realize all of that, then you're free. But until you suffer those daily humiliations, you're not actually free. If we show up for ourselves and for our families and for our neighbors and for this community, trying to put on our best face and not coming as the weak and flawed people we are, we're never actually going to be able to lead ourselves, each other, in this community. The third way that we can keep our hearts open in hell, love God, and love people is to be dealers of hope. An interviewer once asked the great James Baldwin, "Are you still in despair about the world?" Without skipping a beat, James replied, "I have never been in despair about the world. I've been enraged by it, but I've never been in despair about the world. I don't think I have. I can't afford despair," he says. "I can't tell my nephew, my niece, and the children that there's no hope." Here's what I've learned about hope, friends. If you want to find hope, you'll find it. It's there. It's everywhere. It's here in the 100+ people that are in this room, but it's everywhere. It really, really is. And at the same time, the other side of that is if you don't want to find it, you won't find it. You won't find it because there's too much crazy nonsense going on out there. I could spend the rest of my time and the rest of this evening just talking about the things that you and I both know are happening in the news here and around the world. That seems hopeless. And sometimes when I can't seem to find hope out there, I have to look for hope right here. Inside of me, inside of myself, inside of yourselves. As my good friend Joel Leon says, hope has its home in us. So when you fail to find it out there, and that's normal, that's human, start right here. The fourth way we can keep our hearts open in hell, love God, and love people is to be relievers of suffering. God loves when we relieve suffering. I believe God is most evident in our lives when we relieve suffering. When you feed a hungry person, God is right there. When you give shelter to an unhoused person, God is right there. When you hug an addict and tell them it's going to be okay and you're going to stick by them through thick and thin, that's right where God is. When you speak up for innocent people in occupied Palestine, or Sudan, or Congo, or Haiti, or Flint, Michigan, God is there. And when we support politicians and political movements that care about the things that God cares about, God is also right there. How are you relieving suffering today? How are you, this community, relieving suffering today? The fifth and final way, at least for today, there's dozens of these we could discuss. The fifth and final way that we can keep our hearts open in hell, love God and love people, is to be world builders. I talk all the time about leaving a better world for our kids and their kids and their kids and their kids. And I think one time that I preached here a couple years ago, I mentioned this idea of the seventh generation. This Iroquois philosophy that we should make all the decisions we make should be made with 7 generations in mind. A generation is 20 to 30 years. So at minimum, you should be making all of your decisions, what you wear, what you eat, what you don't eat, how you get from point A to point B, where you live, what kinds of resources you consume, which ones you don't consume. All of that should be made with you thinking at least 140 years in the future. As much as we possibly can, we shouldn't do anything that will harm future generations. This opens us up to loving God more and loving the people around us. But this world building that we're doing, and I know I can say that confidently in this room because I've observed Middle for years now, that's actually happening in this place. The world building that we're doing will not happen by accident, though. I want to remind you, it takes intention, it takes planning, it takes creativity. It takes every single one of us bringing our full selves, even the weak and flawed parts of us, to this community and to the world. One of the most terrifying and cool truths ever is that if we do what I just communicated well, this world building well, we probably won't get to see the fruits of our labor. That is terrifying, because why would I want to do, the like very base primal animal part of me is like, why would I do anything that I don't get to reap the benefits of? It is both terrifying and super cool that we get to work and live and eat and drink and play in such a way that we won't get to see the fruits of our labor. So let's wrap this up. What is the ultimate goal of living this kind of a life? One that helps us keep our hearts open while going through and living in hell? What do we get? What happens if we do all of this? Here are a few things that I think we get. I think we get collective liberation. I think we get to experience a world where everybody gets free. Everybody gets free. I want to remind you that if you're living out some sort of an ideology, or if you believe things that exclude any group, you're wrong. I try to leave all definitive answers out these days. I don't know a thing, but I think I can say with confidence that if you're believing something and living for something that excludes any group, you're wrong. So let's do the opposite of that. So what do we get? True community. We get a free New York City where we can get on the train and not worry about being shot in the face by a $29 million a day police force for evading a $2.90 fare. That was a few days ago here in our city. 4 people were wounded, including another cop, because a guy evaded fare. I think if we keep working toward this, we get out of that. What do we get? We get a free Flint, Michigan, where the water is clean and pure, and those that made the water dirty and keep it dirty are held accountable. That's what I think we get. I think we get a free Henderson, North Carolina, where last week a 21-year-old black truck driver named Javion McGee was found hanging from a tree. This is 2024. The cops claimed it was a suicide, and of course they won't let the family see the photos from the crime scene. We need a free Henderson, North Carolina. We need a free United States where rapists and war criminals don't get to run for president. And finally, we have to look beyond our place of residence. So I want to wrap up by, again, giving us a global perspective. We get a free Palestine. We get a free Palestine. We get a free Palestine. We get a free Congo. We get a free Sudan, a free Haiti. Middle Church, my closing question: do you believe that we can achieve collective liberation together? Yes. Do you believe that we can build this world together? Yes. Do you believe that we can get free together? Yes. Then let's do it. Amen.